If I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
All right. This is Superheroes and Gods, episode 1. Welcome. This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn, and we are live. Jump in on your Facebook, Twitch, Periscope, YouTube. Today we got a special show. I call it special because it's number 1 of Superheroes and Gods. We haven't talked about the superhero stuff in a while. We touched on it a couple of days ago on our Halloween special with Gary Wayne. And today, you should know, guess who's back? Gary, how you doing?
Good to be back. And as excited as I was to talk, about the Halloween history and some of the characters and the overlap between giants, this one excites me just as much because it's so pervasive in our society today that it's just a nice change of pace in terms of what I tend to normally talk about. So love to do some of the things that tie in that maybe people overlook that are very, very important to understand.
Yes, sir. I am excited as well. And before we jump right in, guys, I have to plug a few things, okay? First, we have Gary's book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. There, see how thick that is? Oh, yeah, lots of knowledge in there. You know, you choose what you are going to hold on to, there's a lot of history in there, a lot of stuff going on in mythology and whatnot. So you make up your mind about the issues in the book. So, but I have to also tell you to like, subscribe, and share. We're going to ask you to do that because it helps the channel, liking the video, sharing the video, and all that stuff. And also, this is our Parler. Parler is a replacement for Twitter. Lots of great stuff going on in Parler. It's not just politics, but there we have that. This is our Teespring store. Don't Let Them Burn and all that good stuff. If you want to get a mug, a t-shirt, and whatnot, we got more shirts coming. By the way, another way to help us make our documentary, The Alien Deception, that is our website here. It's going through a revamp, but this is what we have now. We have a ton of videos on there, but YouTube has all the content and also BitChute. And this is my channel, Hurricane 7. This is my music channel where we have a music video that actually complements what we're going to talk about tonight, which are, hybrids and whatnot, So the song is called Genetic Apocalypse. It's featuring my daughter, Nikita. And you want to go over there. It's also on this channel as well, but I want people to also go over there because we have stuff coming music-wise as well. So as we move, Superheroes and Gods. Again, just want to show you, this is the book. Okay, there we go. Boom. All right. Lots of information in there. So, Gary, where do you want to start here?
Well, I would say a good place to start is actually, the first chapter of my book as I lead into it, because it sort of eases into things in terms of starting to connect all of the different arms of this Leviathan or arms of this monster that we're going to try and make some sense of and show the consistencies to. So I begin the book, which is a very long book, about a whole lot of different subjects. Interestingly enough, with the idea that in Genesis 6:4, in the King James Version, it's going to say, in those days, the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and created the giants, says in the King James Version, which goes back to the word Nephilim, or in other translations, it'll say Nephilim, and they were the mighty ones and the men of renown. And in other translations, they're going to say they're the heroes of old, and terms like that. And I thought, that's very, very interesting, and that understanding of heroes of old has a very good relationship to that term hero, because they were renowned, right? And renown goes back to the word Shem, which is the same sort of root word for Shem, who is named after the flood, but also to Shemiaim and Shemia, which it means heaven in Hebrew, and I am is the ones. So they were the men of renown of the heavenly ones. They were the giants, and they were the heroes, and they were the mighty ones, or the Gibborim, and you'll hear that term Gibborim. But where I'm going with this is that the superhero, as we understand it today, has its etymology and its history based in those words. And so when you hear the concept of heroes in Greek mythology and understand that, you know, the men of renown or the heroes of old has a similar understanding, and these were the heroes and the Titan offspring. These were the offspring of the gods in a human female, which I'll come back to in a second, were called the heroes because they were superhumans, just as these Nephilim were superhumans, and they were hybrids, offspring of the gods and offspring of the angels. And so when you look up the definition for hero, the more ancient term for it, other than some of the more generic terms for, you know, a hero today who somebody does something good, would be a superhuman.
Yeah.
And with superhuman powers. So a hero in ancientology was understood to have superhuman powers, and it also meant demigod. And what's interesting about that is a demigod is defined as the offspring of a god or an angel and a human female, or vice versa. I would say, just flipping the sex around so that people don't get confused. So you have this history that's directly connected to the heroes of today that absolutely dominate a lot of our entertainment today, and what you're fed as children. And I certainly, and I'm, you know, I'm probably a lot older than a lot of people in the crowd, but I grew up with these superhumans in comic strips, right? And where all of these movies come from today are from basically the comic strips, which are based on this mythos that has come down through the ages. And so it's one of those things that is kept alive, and it's common on all continents, in all cultures around the world. And as you start to dig into it, you start to see many more common denominators that makes you want to have a harder look as to why these superheroes are based on these ancient giants, the offspring of the gods and or the angels, depending on what your belief system is. I call them fallen angels as a Christian, and how they have affected our ancient history and our prehistory and what they're doing today, and how that mythos is kept alive and why. So I think that's a very good place to start and to let you in.
Yes. You know, the Crowleyan, the Crowley was visited by, or his wife was visited by some dude, or not dude, but spirit called, claiming to be Horus. And basically he was looking for the age of the Superman, right? And he died right around the silver age of comics, before it really started taking off. And it was very interesting because he was looking forward to it. And I told somebody in my family that I believe all these superhero movies are ushering what the age of Aquarius, and the new age thing. We're going to transcend into this next form of humanity. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's absolute brainwashing and preparation, so that as they redefine these characters from the allegories that they're sort of presented in, it's kind of these like fairy tale characters, which is a parallel, similar, or the same kind, but a parallel lane of the same type of brainwashing and literature and entertainment that holds their history, their genealogies, and their belief system. And so when we look at how superheroes are projecting an image onto people's thought process today, is it goes along with that concept in the new age of evolving into gods, evolving into something greater than what we are, always within the physical universe or within parallel universes that they can go to, but never into the spiritual realm, only in the physical universe. And so they want to bring back this new age of Atlantis, which is again a pre-flood antediluvian mythos that Francis Bacon wrote about. And Francis Bacon imagined this as the age of Solomon, the 6 days of Solomon, as he would like to call it, that the Royal Society and the modern sciences are based on. And he's the spiritual founder of the Royal Society, and his picture still hangs in the entrance in there today. Mm-hmm. And what's important about that is he wrote as a writer, and also had organized literary societies like the Shakespeare or the Spear Shaker Society, which Shakespeare was said to be part of, and the Knights of the Helmet. And they wrote, you know, like with Shakespeare, some of the great early English of the new language that they were pioneering, and that's why they were creating this Babel language for the end time. To create a universal language, which English has become. And in that, like Shakespeare writes about fairies and all of these kings and things which are associated with these heroes. So the heroes are always kings and queens, or female and male superheroes. And as we move that forward, understanding that that's how history has been told, whether or not it's Metamorphoses and Ovides and Homer and all of the ancient classics, they're doing the same thing. So you roll that forward to the modern time, and you have, in the 1930s, you have the Inkling Society, which is a Rosicrucian, Aleister Crowley, member of the Golden Dawn Society, sponsored writing society that Lewis and Tolkien is involved in. And you start to see that it's this ideology that is controlling the literary societies that are writing for Hollywood today, writing for the comics books as they came out, dominating all the different genres, whether it's horror or science fiction, and dominating the companies that own them, that are producing these occultic, allegories or fairy tales of their history, their belief systems, and their genealogies. And again, they will show the organizations that are making these productions will show their allegiances and their belief system in the iconology and the symbols that they form their names around, and their let's say logos and things like that. So they will show you whether or not it's Marvel Comics or companies like that will, you know, Paramount, where you have Mount Hermon and the tens of tens leaders with all of the different stars representing all of the ones, including Azazel. They will always show in plain sight who they are. Yes, indeed. I totally agree.
You know, in the X-Men, and you don't have to go off on this, I'm just trying to point out fun facts here, is pretty much they take, all these writers draw from something, as we're saying, mythology or whatnot, and then you go into secret societies, and the X-Men have something called a Hellfire Club. This was a real club in the real world, and I think it was Benjamin Franklin that might have been a part of that. Am I correct?
What was the name of that club? You kind of faded out on me there.
Oh, the Hellfire Club.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I'm not sure whether he was a member of that or not. I haven't researched it. I know he was a member of all sorts of secret clubs and societies, and one of the main proponents through the Quest Society to start secret societies in North America.
There we go. So yeah, if you want to search that out, people, Hellfire Club. I'm bringing it up right now, but so that you can see a visual of what I'm talking about. But we're not going to go deep into it because, like Gary said, he didn't really, research that. But it's all up in the X-Men. They had a movie X-Men. It was it was set in the 60s, 70s, and this was a part of the whole storyline. That Hellfire Club was where the bad guys and whatnot. But anyway.
Yeah, and as it goes, what I do know about it is look at that name as an allegory for the oath harem anathema that the angels took to carry out the consequences to the end, and the consequences is the lake of fire, that the demigods and the demigod offsprings and the gods who procreated these superheroes and the rebellious angels are reserved to go to after the end time, as Matthew talks about. And so when we look at, the allegory of that, hell is actually broken down into, 2 or 3 different sources as it comes of the Old Testament and the New Testament, and the translators have conflated those terms. So hellfire should be the lake of fire. It shouldn't be the hellfire. Hell is more closely related to Hades or Sheol, as Hebrew would label it. Hades more in the Greek language, and or the abyss, which is in the underworld which is the same place as Hades or Sheol. So they've conflated those 3 terms into one. They're related, but the lake of fire is where the second death for humans will take place who aren't going to be saved into eternity, and for the rebellious angels, and for those who take the mark, and for the demigods who were produced by the rebellious angels.
Yes. And also, just to point out another historical fun fact, it's when you see the age of enlightenment, the age of new thought and all this stuff. I can't remember the proper term for it right now, but it's where you start getting evolution, atheism, most of the things of old, they get pushed back, and you bring in all this new thought through theosophy and whatnot, Crowleyism, all this stuff. This was part of the birth of comic books. So go ahead, sir.
Yes. So I just was thinking about that name, for X-Men, and X has a symbolism in it that people don't really know. You've got 2 V's. One is upside down, and they sort of join to form that X. So you got these 2 V's, or like that. That is the male and the female glyph out of ancientology. And that is really talking about this X factor, this X gene, this union of a female goddess and a human male, or as the occult expansion and sort of history of that is, and also the male god and the human female, which is that gene of Isis they like to talk about. Or it could be an extra DNA manipulated gene that they inserted into some of these, because the X-Men are more, for the most part, aren't really a crossbreed between different kinds of animals or not. They tend to have a specific added on manipulation, or a skill, or a knowledge, or something like that, something that's almost like transhumanism put in, but it's grown in sort of a biological sort of nature from a gene. So it's got a few different allegories that are in it. And when you look at these superheroes, I think that we were talking about in terms of how they come out of the old comic books, you basically have 3 that were promoting all of these different ideologies as it comes out in the late 20s and early 30s for the most part. And so you've got like DC comic books, and interesting enough that DC, I think there's more to it than Detective Comics, but we'll see whether or not, I've not proven anything there that there's anything within that name DC, but it's got some interesting initials that you could have a symbology for. But they created superheroes like Batman and Wonder Woman. Of course, Wonder Woman comes from the Amazon women, which were Greek female giants. And you've got, the Green Lantern, Flash Gordon, Cyborg, Joker, Riddler, Lex Luthor, Catwoman, ghoul heads. They've got quite an array of characters that they would have produced. You also have Action Comics, who produced Superman. from the planet Krypton, and of course that goes into, as its etymology goes back as something hidden, crypto, probably in another dimension. And Superman goes back to the house of El, El being the Hebrew word for angel, just as Al is, right? So when you see that word royale, that is a king of a god, royal bloodline. Al as in Baal, and that is sort of the Canaanite alliteration also into the Sumerian. It can also be Il or Alu or ALLAH or ILU. It's got several different transliterations for the same root word around the Middle East. But Superman is from the house of Elf, the son of Kal-El. And his name, Superman's name, is Jor-El or Dor-El, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And he is the offspring of an angel. He's of the El family, of the demigod royale bloodline as a superhero. And he has an S on his chest that looks like a snake, stylized serpent. And that's because the gods that go back as El or Al for the most part are the watchers. And for the most part, those are seraphim watchers that they're talking about. And the seraphim, which is the Hebrew word seraph, is a serpent-faced dragon angel with wings, right? And that's why most of these demigods can also fly. It's part of the allegory as to who they're connected back to. And these dragon seraphim angels were the watchers, and their offspring would have looked just like them. And that's why so many of the religious aspects, because they produced offspring that were the priests and the warriors and also the kings. And there are different classifications of Nephilim, but this is the serpent one. And so that's why you have so much imagery in terms of the gods, in terms of, let's say, the plumed serpent or the feathered serpent of North America, the Nagas of India, why so many of the gods around the Middle East are serpent gods like Osiris and Zeus and Anki and the dragon gods of China, and on and on and on, just to name a few. And their kings were dragon or serpent kings. And we covered this off a little bit, I think, in the Halloween show with Akhenaten. He's, 1200 to 1400 BC. He still has a lot of those characteristics if somebody want to bring them up. So this is a classification of serpent-like superheroes from the past. And of course, they're depicted with these elongated skulls as well, and these high cheekbones and protruding chins. And so that's the imagery that Superman is really coming out of as the house of El. And also understand that in the Canaanite pantheon, their parent god, who is the father parent of Baal, is El, E-L. Right? And so this fits perfectly in that mythos that we're talking about in terms of how Superman is posed. And he's like a son of a god, or he is like a messiah type figure who is trying to save us from the forces of evil, which is the duality at the macro level of yin and yang, good versus evil, that never wins. And then there are good superheroes and bad superheroes, white magic, black magic, good Nephilim, bad Nephilim, that are going to fight, but they're all worshiping the same sort of pantheon. And, I look at that symbol that they're using, that they put the S in, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, but a lot of times that is like shaped like an upside down triangle or pyramid. And in behind you have the yellow, that is the understanding in the occult belief system as light and or knowledge, which is that Gnostic cult that they come out of. So, and some people say that's clearly not, that's more of a pentagram, but either or, they're still creating their imagery in different types of symbols as they show it. But so many, and I think you just flashed one that had sort of that green sort of look that really shows that serpentine type of look that that I think that they're trying to represent through Superman, and that was out of Action Comics. And they produced the idea along with DC of the multiverses that all have the same sort of fate. The one that I think has the best etymology back to prehistory is Marvel comics. And Marvel, the etymology goes back to Old French through Merville and back into history, into Latin and into Greek jointly, and it means to wonder at, to astonish, a wonder story or a legend or a myth. And it's the Greek word that is translated into the book of Enoch as, looking at these giant beings. They're called marvelous beings I think in third Enoch. And just as pseudo Aristotle wrote about marvelous things heard about Atlantis and those 10 Nephilim kings produced by Poseidon through a human female. And so this is a term that comes down that's deeply connected to these ancient Nephilim, and it means in Hebrew the word tamah, when they use the word marvelous translated into English, to be amazed, a miracle, just as the hybrid offsprings were considered miracle, demigod, marvelous things to wonder at. And so when you see the connections that are used in the Greek translations into English of third Enoch, and then you see comic books which are clearly occult history basing their characters on these giants, and you see that etymology follow through with that symbolism. They chose that for a particular reason, because they want people to know, if they wanted to dig into it and start into the mysteries, this is part of understanding the mysteries, is understanding their allegories and their symbolism.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring up some pictures later on. There's a comic book series called Earth X, Paradise X, and whatnot. Yep. And that whole series right there. If you haven't seen this series and you really want to know pretty much their history, not the real history, I'm not talking about world history, but the mythos of why superheroes actually exist in the world, you have to get that series. It tells you the seeding of the planet and all that. We'll get into that later, but I'm going to bring it up. So I'm going to have Gary keep going. I have to step away for 2 seconds, Gary. So just take him on a trip.
So let's now talk about the kinds of superheroes that you're going to see. And, they're basically going to be broken up into 4 or 5 different categories. And typically you've got one that is what we've already talked about with the X-Men, of the sort of DNA modified type of superhero. And then you have, and that one is a little bit different than all of the other ones, but that might include individuals like Spider-Man, so where they get their DNA manipulated through, in this case, something that comes from a spider for Spider-Man. And you've got like the Fantastic Four and the Incredible Hulk, although the Hulk is large. You've got Iron Man. You've got, like with the X-Men that have all of those extra powers, and you have Scorpion superheroes as well. And although you might take that back to the Crab Baloo or the Gerda Baloo as being gods that were created by Tiamat, I still think they fall more into that DNA modified group. So you've got also, arachnids and scorpion superheroes, and you've got Scorpion Man, you've got Silver Scorpion, and superheroes like that. And that's the one that we've sort of talked about at the beginning. But if you think about different kinds of gods, you have different shapes of animals represented in these gods. And that's where most of the other ones sort of come from. And so we've already talked a little bit about the serpent Nephilim, and we'll just sort of continue on that just for a few minutes. So you've got, in terms of serpent Nephilim, you've got, Serpentine superheroes. You've got things like Superman, who we've talked about. You've got Bushmasters. You've got Cobra. You've got Red Serpent. You've got King Hiss. You've got Nagnaj, which goes back to subcontinent of India, to the Nagas. You've got Cobra. You've got Copperhead, and on and on and on, of all of these different kinds of serpent type of superheroes, both good and evil, again representing that sort of duality. And again, all of that sort of goes back to that serpent god in terms of being the offspring of them. And none of that is coincidental. And you started to get that after the development of Superman. So Superman's kind of introduced as the first real mainstream popular superhero that they didn't want to get sort of too far out on, but it became so popular, then they started to add in all of these other different kinds of let's say representations of the ancient gods and the ancient Nephilim. So as we understand these things going forward, you have these other superheroes that are basically warrior superheroes for the most part, as opposed to the royal bloodlines or the kings and or the leaders of the armies, although some of these other ones could have been as well. But the next kind of group is, I would put this one first because it's probably most familiar to most people, is the lion type of superhero and the lion god. And so that typically goes back from a Christian perspective back to the Hebrew word for lion, which can be two sources, which is L-A-B-I-H, which Labaya comes from, which is thought to be the original name for King Saul, and Saul was more of a title. And to Eri, A-R-I-Y, which means lion, and Ariel, which means heroic, and with an E-L on it, almost sounds like a name of a fallen angel, because most angels end in E-L, which is why, I was focusing hard on the E-L part at the beginning. And so you get, and Ariel, Hebrew 740, actually means lion of God, as you take that meaning forward. Now, if you understand that from a Christian perspective, with the lion men of Moab and the lion men of Gad, and these were warrior type of Nephilim after the flood, in the time of David still, so like 1000 BC, so a long time they're surviving after the flood. These are thought to go back to angels that look like lions or cats of some sort. So you've got, gods like Nergal and Sekhmet, and you've got Mahis in the Egyptian pantheon, and Bast. And so you'll get superheroes that are kind of reflecting some of that. And in history, you've got the name of these lion warriors that come out of Sumerian, and you get depictions both in Sumeria and in Egypt on reliefs. So, and I've got again documents on this where you'll see some pictures of them in ancient reliefs, but they're called the Irma Hulo. And sometimes they're depicted with a lion's head, sometimes they're depicted with a lion's body. So it's a couple of different kinds. So they've produced, like with Bast, which is a very popular movie in the last 4 or 5 years. Bast was a god that was very much into creating different types of beings and black magic and things like that. And she produced the Black Panther imagery for the Black Panther superhero. And that's why Bast shows up in that movie as one of those gods, right?
Right. Yeah.
So again, it's one of those sort of recent direct connections that people can make. So when you look at some of the other ones that people might be familiar with, and I'll just name a few, and you probably have more up there, like Catwoman out of the
Oh yeah.
Batman series,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
You have Red Lion, which is another one that's a little bit older. And you also have the Thundercats
Oh
more
yeah.
recently. And you have Lion O as well. And you have, Lion Kings in some of the fairy tales, and Beauty and the Beast, which is a king, which looks like most depictions are more of a lion head. And so you've got a number of superheroes that again follow that line as well. And so that would be the second sort of animal sort of lineage. Then you have the Anunnaki sort of version, which is very, very interesting. And that's the bird, raven, owl type of look to the superheroes and the gods, or the Anunnaki gods that have that raven sort of face, or the Horus falcon god would be, another name that people might be familiar with in terms of what that would look like. So they produced something called the Tengu in Southeast Asia, which were thought to be priests and warriors class. And they had these distinct these bird faces, and they also taught and were the source of the samurai's martial arts, which goes back into the history as part of that knowledge of the arts. And of course, if you take that back into prehistory, it's Azazel, and El, and he's depicted as a goat these days, but he used to be, before he was degraded, a seraphim god. He is the one who taught and brought war to the earth. And he taught the knowledge for battling and the strategy for war. He taught the knowledge of how to make weaponry, how to use them, and taught the knowledge of self-defense through the martial arts. All of that's linked back to Azazel in terms of who the Tengu would get that ancient knowledge sort of passed down from. And that was taught to the whole earth. And Azazel, I know, is a serpent type god in his original seraphim form, but I just wanted to make that connection back on the knowledge. And so you've got these Tengu warriors that you get, like Robin, Red Robin, that the superheroes would come from, and Hawk or Nighthawk or Falcon Man, right? You get these type of imageries, and within the Quiché Maya, who are, have as most of their gods as plumed serpents or seraphim gods, they also have a demigod classification as the offspring of the gods. And again, I think of these bird type of gods because the Xibalba, Zibalba, were these bird-faced demigods that lived in the underworld, and very similar to almost like a vampire type of mythos. And vampires and drinking of blood is always, a significant part of a lot of these superheroes and the mythos of the Nephilim and the secret societies that come down. Yeah. And what's interesting about that is they have one branch in the Xibalba called Camazotz, Camazotz. And if you Google Camazotz, you're going to bring up this look that is the modern Batman look.
Yeah.
Right. And I just find that probably the most strongest connection to a superhero back to these Nephilim type of creations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one caught me off guard when the news came out, because I was trying to figure out Batman for a while, and Spirit of Vengeance, that's one part of him. I didn't do any research on Bat gods, but here we are.
Yeah, and it comes out of the bird. It comes out of the bird line, and specifically a branch out of Xibalba, out of the Quiché Maya. And again, that imagery is just so amazing in terms of the imageries that they show. And what's interesting about these bird ones is that they show the wings, right? And I'm not convinced that many of the ancient giants had wings, but I think it's an allegory that's encoded into the bird ones that take them back to their angelic procreators. And I think that's why, and there's why they have so many prominent different characters. And you also got different ones that show up in sort of different forms, whether or not it's like, you know, the penguin in the Batman series, right? But
Yeah.
anything that's sort of bird-like will go back to that Tengu, Anunnaki, falcon type of imagery to those kinds of gods.
Yes. And you know, you also got Quetzalcoatl or whatever, even though that's another branch,
Yep.
but
Yep.
from yeah. So you know, it's very interesting, and it's unfolding in a time where information is bursting out the seams, right? Because
Yeah,
I think,
yeah, exactly.
and for those that are listening that are not saved or whatnot, or even if you're saved and you love your superheroes, hey, you know, that's between you and God right there. Okay. I like to watch Superman movies or whatnot. Okay. So we're not being legalistic here. We're just pointing out what these, the imagery, the iconography, they're drawn from old pagan stuff. And it goes back all the way
Yep.
to Genesis 6. You have the antediluvian world, which he talked about. Even Plato wrote about this. Okay. And he was dead serious about it. It wasn't no game for him. All right. So just bear in
Yep.
mind, we're just giving you, you know, a little bit of history. You search it out for yourself. And, you know, if you don't believe, again, search it out. Go ahead.
Search it out, absolutely. And then you also have the last one of the animal ones, for the most part, that I can link back to the gods, which would be the dog superheroes. So, and you know, superheroes you might have of of the dog ones tend to go back to you know, a specific set of gods as well, and you would recognize these superheroes as, you know, obviously Underdog, which was a cartoon,
Mhm.
but you have Wolverine, even though it's part of the X-Men. I wonder whether or not there's a connection there in terms of that not being DNA, but that might go back to the dogmen gods. You've got Wolfbane, you've got Timberwolf, you've got Manwolf,
Mhm.
you've got Bat Dog, which is a combination. You've got Rex the Wonder Dog, which again, King, dog together, Hyper Dog. So you've got a number of these superheroes, and that goes back to this mythos of the dogmen, which
Yeah.
have a mythos of being mercenaries in the armies, and right after, even after the flood, you even have, you know, Saint Christopher in the Eastern Orthodox Church as him being shown as a dog-like character coming out of North Africa, which is connected back to the Canaanites somehow. So you have these dogmen that all come down through history, whether or not it's recorded through legends or it's recorded through historians, whether it's Herodotus or Pliny or Cestius or Marco Polo. They all talk about these dogmen warrior class of individuals. And you have a class of gods that are like dogs. You have Anubis, which is a jackal god. So you have also jackals superheroes and jackal and dog gods that were thought to produce these. And Anubis's city was called Sinopolis. And Cynocephali is the mythos of the dogmen. So it's interesting that you've got, you know, a dog city in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, where they had a whole race of these dog people, where most of the dog sightings show up, according to historians, but they also show up in India, Cestius talks about, and they're also part of the Chinese belief system with actually an island of these creatures, and they're closely related to the Tengu in the Chinese mythology, which kind of makes sense because they all sort of have the same type of creations. And then biblically, you even have, as you take that back to the Bible, you have King Oreb and Zeb of the Midianites.
Mm.
And what's interesting about that, Zeb is the Hebrew word for wolf, and Oreb is the Hebrew word for raven. And these are two kings that are killed in the book of Judges, and the Midianites would have been ruled over by Rephaim or different kinds of Nephilim. But it's interesting that they're taking their names back to those types of warrior gods. And Caleb, who is a mercenary for the Hebrews, because he's a Kenizzite and is part of the scouts that Joshua takes into the covenant land, and actually inherits, let's say Rephaim central for the Anakim in Hebron, which is Kiriath Arba in history. And Arba is the name for the father of the Anak, or the Anakim, is the area that he's going to inherit as being sort of adopted into the tribe of Judah when they divvy up the land. And Caleb goes back to the Hebrew word 3611, which is dog and dog mercenary. And so I'm not saying he was a dog warrior, but it's interesting that his name shows up as a mercenary. And what happens is a lot of people get named after the ancient gods and things. So I'm not trying to say he's a dog Nephilim, but he was certainly a mercenary, and he was not Hebrew. And in Second Kings, we get an interesting connection here. You get Nibaz, Nibhaz, which is an Avim god, Avvim, or Avim. It shows up both ways in the Bible. That is a branch of the Rephaim that were intermixed with the Philistines, and it's who the Philistines move into when they migrate from Crete over to the Promised Land. And they worship this Nibaz, and that means, as you take that back to Hebrew, the barker, or the barker god.
Yeah.
And their offspring is thought to have lived in a city called Lycopolis in the Greek spelling, and then Sinopolis as well. So one wonders whether or not Nibaz is the same god as Anubis or not, but there seems to be more than one city, or they're all naming the same kind of city. But when you get sightings of these dogmen all around the world, and it's interesting as well is that Goliath, when David is coming at him, he says to David, he says, "What, do you think I'm a dog?" I don't think he thinks he's a dog as an animal. I don't think he thinks that David is disrespecting him as not being the powerful Rephaim giant that he is. I think there's a hierarchy that the Rephaim consider themselves higher, and he's not just a dog warrior. He's superior to that, and he's not showing him that kind of respect. And of course, dogs aren't looked on all that well throughout the Bible.
That is true. That is true. So what's interesting to me, what you're pointing out here, is that they're mercenaries, and you always see some of the powerful anti-hero, animal godlike people being mercenaries. And going back to what you said about the X-Men, they're not human people at all. They have past the point of transhumanism into posthumanism. And again, we'll pick that up in a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they've evolved into another level, right, on their path to godhood. And that's what they're promising people of the earth. So if you hear about some of the terms that are being used, like in some of the TV shows that have come out in the last couple of years, like the Church of the Gibberim, and that they're all working towards this direction of what's just in front of us in terms of humanism, DNA alteration, that can give us longer lives, more powers, more cognitive abilities, implants, cloning, all of this sort of stuff, whether or not it's just adding parts on board, sort of implants, you name it, all of that is moving us in that direction to these type of beings. And the mythos that gets set up there is that the former mundane, obsolete people are against the emerging demigods, right? And
Yeah.
so it's the humans that become the evil ones, and these new beings become the enlightened, superior, royale group that's going to take over the world, and humans are just there to serve them.
Pretty much. And also, you know, now you're pointing out a lot of things here, historical and whatnot, mythological and whatnot, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the concept in some people's mind might be, well, the people that read comic books or watch superhero movies or play the superhero video games, they don't believe this stuff. They do. They do. They have channels out there that explain it, but in a secular context. Okay, all these people that become level 5 godlike beings or whatnot, super mutants. They even break down the mythology as well because they're versed in it. So it's not something we're making up here. Just to
Yeah.
clarify. Go ahead.
And one of the pillars that sort of goes along with it, and sometimes shown up in superhero movies, is the development of knowledge and technology, and or becoming these superhumans through that knowledge. And that's typically representing magi, sorcerers, magicians, and things like that. So if I look at that movie, I think it was Doctor Strange, where they're trying to win a realm for themselves in this universe, and you have this dark overlord of that dominates the rest of the universe. That's sort of the allegory of, you know, Satan trying to have a realm, to have a world where he can be like God but separate from God, and that's what they're trying to win, as this negotiated peace between the dark overlord and these people of the knowledge, these special orders, these secret societies of this
Yeah.
knowledge. And those secret societies of this knowledge and or orders are similar, and they're different branches of the same thought belief. So they're either going to be of these warrior type of superheroes, they're going to be this hidden, ancient, powerful, developing knowledge, or the rich elite that take on a mask of a superhero as well, because they're the royale bloodlines.
Yes. Yes, this is definitely replete through the comic books. In fact, let me bring up something interesting for you guys, because if I say it and don't show it, most people won't believe me. Illuminati. Marvel. They have an Illuminati comic book in the Marvel universe. Okay. And the circle is the round table is Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Black Bolt. He's not human either. Well, I won't say either, but he's not human, period. Okay. He's inhuman. You have the dude from Fantastic Four. You have Captain Namor. You have um, uh, the dude from X-Men, Professor X, and they add and subtract groups. They have a female version here. Okay. So this is not happenstance or somebody just want to play on the word.
So, and the round table is
Mhm.
the allegory, and most people would know that if they're a little bit more into classical, ancient, not ancient, but say more classical literature. That would be the superheroes of that time. So let's go back to the round table of King Arthur, right? And he's a Pendragon, son of Uther Pendragon, and his wife Guinevere is of the female fairy princess and goddess of the fairy bloodline. So you have a dragon bloodline, you have a fairy bloodline. The fairy bloodlines are kind of similar to the understanding of the bird bloodline as well, and that's why you have Owl in there with Lilith and Tiamat as well, although Tiamat is typically classified more as a serpent goddess, but Lilith is the offspring of Tiamat. So that's where that sort of connection comes from. But in that whole allegory of King Arthur, which again has the history, and you've got Merlin as that ancient wizard, and you have these bloodlines. You have this as a new Atlantis as he's pulling out Excalibur, which goes back to the Tuatha De Danann, as do both Guinevere's and Arthur's bloodlines. And the Excalibur sword goes back to Scythia, where the Tuatha De Danann migrated from. You have the round table, right? This is round table, not knights. These are the round table of kings.
Mm.
This is like Gawain comes from the king of Lot in Norway and is part of the same realm and bloodline of Rollo that's going to produce William the Conqueror that conquers England again. This is that same bloodline that is united against the Roman Empire of that time that are fighting together. And that round table is a ring. This is the Lord of the Rings. This is the ring lords of the Anunnaki imagery that is coming down in the mythology throughout history. So when they reintroduced the round table into comic books, it's the same history being told in a little bit different format over and over and over and over. And we get closer to the end time, the evolving mythos is getting closer and closer to their ancient identifications. Right, to what they originally looked like in their original positions before the flood and probably shortly after the flood.
Yes, sir. And I'm bringing up what I've been talking about since we started here, Earth X series. Right? And I'm pretty sure you'll have a little fun with this. Have you read it?
Which one?
The Earth X, Paradise X series.
I have not. There's
Okay.
so many different ones out there now. It's hard to keep up.
Universe X. So basically, just to give the short story, there's a watcher. Hello, a watcher on the right with a robot. The robot represents. It's an allegory for a human, but it's a robot, right? And so it's been endowed with human personalities, a belief in God, morality, love, hate, all that stuff, right? And so the watcher is continually chipping away at what he's made up, how he's made up. And then he starts telling them about these celestials that came and seeded the planet, panspermia.
Yep.
And from there, the seed germ germinated, and then we had what we would call Nephilim, and then a catastrophe happened, and then after that catastrophe, the seed germinated again, and that's where we got the heroes, the Hercules, and all the ones we can name, right?
Yep.
And then the seed went dormant again, and it germinated again around Hitler's time, right?
Yep.
Went a little bit dormant, then came back in our modern time where we get the Spider-Mans, the Supermans, and all this other stuff.
Yep.
And so with this series, you see a crossover of kind of like the DC and Marvel in a sense, or it might be just Marvel. I don't want to make a mistake with that. So anyway, the artist here, I think, is Alex Ross. But anyway, so by the end of the whole thing, the world is flooded with superheroes to the point where Wolverine is married to his girlfriend Phoenix, and he got a belly now. But basically, there's so many superheroes, everybody doesn't have to work anymore. But there comes a cosmic threat, which is also an allegory for the return of Christ. But they don't say that, but that's what it's pretty much an allegory to that. I mean, all of these superheroes have to, come out of their retirement or whatnot and fight this cosmic threat. That's what this whole series is about. And I recommend it only because once you see the thread of the mythos, you can't go back.
Yes, and that's why it's always telling their history as they go, right? And they are, they're projecting and wanting that showdown with the God of the universe and against Jesus. They want to win that war. They want to win their freedom. And so as they're advancing our knowledge, and I believe they are, and I think we're going to talk about that on a future show. You have this analogy with prehistory where you had the 7 sacred sciences being developed by Cain and Enoch, and then a renaissance of that with his descendants of Lamech and his offspring of Nama, Tubal-Cain, Jubal, and Jabal. And at that point in time, you have the marriage of the illicit knowledge from heaven coming down at the same time to super advance their existing science disciplines, which is the 7 liberal arts as we would know today. At the same time, you have the introduction of the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And they unite to take over the whole world. So it's interesting how you have that same story being told out in that sort of history and future that's about to take place in that chronology, which is identical to what has happened and what they believe is going to happen. And it's that knowledge that is inexplicable that we've had in the last 100 years that is advancing at a rate that we just can't imagine, that is going to have a significant impact on what they say they can do. But we have to be careful as to who they want this advancing knowledge for. So a lot of the superhero and science fiction is transplanting of consciousness today, right?
Yes.
And into different bodies. Well, that's only for the demonic spirits. That's what they're trying to create to be the host of those bodies, not for humans. And so I think that's one way we're going to start seeing some of these Nephilim, or the demons past, come into the physical world and into this age that they're trying to lead us into.
Yes, and I've shown proof of that. Exactly what you're saying on a couple of videos now, where this New Age or whatever it's called, he loves to channel spirits or whatnot. They're supposedly giving him technology from the past, present, and future. But anyway, by the end of the interview, he says that they want to come in and inhabit the AI that they're giving them the technology to build. And it's all about creating a false consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for them to come in with their consciousness and then do whatever they want. So I know it sounds far-fetched, new listeners, people that have just jumped in. I get it, but the evidence is out there from more than one source, by the way. So right here we have the watch.
I mean, it's.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's a constitutive belief system of polytheism, which all of this imagery and heroes and stuff that we've been talking about today comes out of. That's what they believe. That's where they believe the world is headed. Yeah,
and make no mistake, people. This all stems from the original creators. The Stan Lees and all these other people. And then people, when it comes into your population, into the consciousness of our modern day population, we it's fun for us. We like to read it. It wows us, marvels us. And after that happens, you have it multiplying. So some of these people that are making comic books, I had a comic book series when I was younger. It was passed around my high school or whatnot. I would let my friends read it, but I had no clue about all this stuff. So we're not saying that everybody that's making a comic book is into all this stuff, but it has a source. It has a source.
Yes.
And some people are putting spirituality as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, people wonder, where does Hollywood come up with all of these ideas for horror movies, for science fiction, for superheroes, fairy tales, on and on and on and on. They're fed that information, and they're using lower level literary guilds to continually develop it. And, I guess the best one that I would look at today that sort of encapsulates the focus is Walt Disney, who was a Freemason and a Rosicrucian. And Walt Disney is absolutely loaded in its history with the development of the fairy and the elves and the gnomes and all of these type of characters, and fairy queens and fairy princesses and godmothers and things like that in the movies and the things in the TV shows that they would produce. And he also, or not he, but now the corporation has basically taken complete control of DC Comics, Action Comics, and Marvel Comics, and are producing these movies en masse And if Walt Disney was a Rosicrucian, which he was, I mean, that knowledge is coming down through the writers, through people like Walt Disney and the people still connected to that corporation. And I don't think any of that is coincidental. I think they're there to continue to prepare humanity and brainwash them to accept what they're going to deceive us with in the not so distant future.
Yeah, sorry about that. My dog's going crazy here.
That's okay. I have a puppy as well, so.
So here we are. Somebody pointed out something that we didn't mention yet, that the last days has to do with the reoccurring. It's like it's going to be like the days of Noah.
Yes.
Right. And
absolutely.
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, we have no idea what it was really like. We just have some, some things alluded to, and the amount of people on the planet, what they were into. Sorry, but 200 years after the flood is where the Tower of Babel came up, and that's where we go. That's where we find our first instances of the witchcraft that we know today. Only 200 years and it started. And so I'm pretty sure it was back in the days of Noah as well. And now we see a rise of all this. Go ahead, sir.
Well, there's a couple of very, very important points you made in there to unpack. So the days of Noah, which Jesus uses in the overarching part of the signs of the end time, which follows immediately the fig tree generation as to what starts that clock rolling. He uses the word specifically the days of Noah, which in Genesis 9:28 to 29, that's the same language. Days of Noah were 350 years after the flood and 600 years before the flood. And it's going to be like that days. And that's in the days when the whole earth was corrupted. That's the Hebrew word shakath. That means corrupted as in degraded, changed, spoiled. And that reflects the domination point, which is, you were referring to earlier, which where they want to get back to, with all of these superheroes that were running everywhere and eating and human beings and drinking their blood, but also all of the DNA and all of the, not all of it, most of the DNA and most of the DNA of plants were all modified, the genomes with the plants. And that's why God had to call the animals to the ark. And those words that it's got, Noah did what was commanded him, those words are inserted. It's God commanded, as you take that back to Hebrew, all the animals, because he knew which ones were pure. Just as he knew the bloodlines of Noah and his family were pure to start the new world off in. And so what Jesus is telling us is we need to understand as much as we can about the days of Noah, because it's going to be like that. It's not just the violence. It's not just not expecting the end time. It's all the days of Noah, which included everything that we're talking about, both before and after the flood. Yeah. And because there's so little knowledge on that, we have to dig deeper, because these forces are going to reimagine what that world was like to deceive us.
Right.
And that's what they're preparing us for.
And it also goes and says like the days of Lot. So that's something going toward Sodom and Gomorrah and the 5 cities that got destroyed. Men, women, and children wanted to sleep with these angels. Okay?
Yes.
It was a joke. Okay?
Yeah. And it's not a one of those additions and I look at all the additions as important pieces of information to tack on to the other accounts in the Gospels. And in this case, you have the connection of Sodom and Gomorrah and destruction by fire, where you had the Nephilim being in the antediluvian world with the flood in Mark and Luke's account, right? Days of Noah. This is days of Noah in Luke, plus it's like the days of Lot. So the next destruction is that destruction by fire that's coming. That's sort of the connection to why it's important to understand that. And in there, as you mentioned, they were trying to have sex with angels. They knew they were angels, and these were male angels. And so that's where sort of the sodomy sort of aspect comes from. But they were, as you talking about, wanted to have sex with this strange flesh.
Yes.
And strange flesh is a different species, a different kind. So it's
Mhm.
almost like they wanted to have them change their gender because they had this changeling quality, or something else even more strange is going on, that they want to have sex with these angels to create more Nephilim. And what it suggests in all of that is that they understood the concept of angels procreating with humans to create these demigods, and they wanted to do it again. And what's interesting about that in the occult belief system, Sodom and Gomorrah are very important cities with them as well. They're the cities, Sodom and Gomorrah are cities of light. As Camelot, the shining city, is the allegory in King Arthur. And you hear that shining city a lot for Washington, D.C., or for what's going to be the global center of the world down the road, because it's the same imagery. Those are cities of light, cities of knowledge, and cities of polytheism. And I think it's in the Gospel of Judas and the Tablets of Seth, and there's another one in there, might be I'm trying to remember the one about the book of John, but it's a different one than obviously in the Bible. It talks about Sodom and Gomorrah as being, Gomorrah was the place where the Amakaseth giants were planted before the flood, and then Sodom afterwards. And then those cities were all named after those antediluvian cities, or were inherited by the Canaanites. That cities survived, just as Erech is thought to be the city of Uruk, which was part of the Nimrod cities as the cities he founded after the flood. I think they more had a renaissance of these ancient areas. And the Sodom and Gomorrah area is in the vicinity of Mount Hermon. Right. So you have these connections that I think are there for a reason. And we're being instructed to learn everything we can about this, because the version that's going to come at us from the polytheists is not going to be accurate. And it's going to be a reinventing revisionist history.
Yes. I'm going to point out some of the creators, modern day creators. This is Grant Morrison. Do you have any idea about him, sir?
Not really, other than his works are, he's actually quite a talented writer, as most of these individuals are, but the amount of knowledge and stuff that they've got encoded into his works is amazing. Is there something in there you specifically wanted to touch on?
Oh yeah, for sure. If you go and listen to some of his talks, and he also has a documentary out. Can't remember the name of it right now, but he has a book out called Super Gods, I believe it's called. Anyway, he gives testimony about using drugs or whatnot to contact spirits, and they would take him, and supposedly he's either at the Pleiades, or Alpha Centauri. Anyway, whichever sun that has I think it's a place for 3 suns or whatever. Anyway, that's not the important part. It doesn't mean he went there, but he was taken into a spiritual realm. And they told him the messages that they're giving him for him to place it in the comic books. So when you see how weird his comic books are, there's even one where he wrote one of the comics, and there was a guy representing him in the comic, right? And the guy came down with a weird skin disease or something like that. And in real life, he started coming down with the same thing. So we're dealing with alchemical magic, demons giving stories. Go ahead.
Sounds a lot like Crowley, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah,
it really does. And when you hear about the New Age, and there's a lot of different names of whom they're talking to, they call them spirit guides. They call them sometimes aliens. Sometimes it's the Great White Brotherhood. Sometimes it's the Celestial Masters, the Enlightened Ones. There's hundreds of different names for the same individuals. They are talking to the demonic world and to fallen angels not in the abyss. They are getting knowledge from that other dimension, which, parallel universes that all have a common fate, the fairy aspect of that belief system in superhero comic mythology and mythos. They are saying that to communicate with these individuals, you need to alter your consciousness through drugs, through meditation, through different aspects, so that you can receive knowledge from these individuals. But what you're doing is you're actually inviting them in. But if you can make that connection, you can astral plane, but it's the knowledge that they say that they're receiving that is helping them to write a lot of this information. So again, that sounds like the Rosicrucians who talked with their spiritual masters, received this knowledge. It sounds like what the Nazis were doing as part of their Ariosophy, which was an evolution or a mutation of a theosophy, which was invented by the Gnostics to be the end-time religion that marriages science and religion. They said that they were in contact with these masters who were giving them the knowledge that was advancing their weaponry, whether or not it's the single wing plane, it's the rocket engines, it's the missiles, it's all sorts, it's the Tiger tanks and the that still have tanks are modeling after, that was so far advanced. They said they didn't have that knowledge themselves. That was provided to them through their rituals of Ariosophy, which is that whole mystical and thing. So it's all talking about the same thing. And also understand Crowley was a big supporter, the Rosicrucians, of the Nazis, right? So
yes,
it's you get those common threads that weave through. And so when you see these characters that they then write about in their literature, they're based on true beings, whether or not they're hybrids, whether or not they're ancient humans, or they're the various gods.
Yes. In the Shazam movie, right? You had, and in the comic books, and we had a big review on that thing, me and Kevin Shrum. But anyway, there's at the end of it, I mean, you're dealing with portals, realms, and all this stuff, right? And they even had one portal that opened up, and guess what kind of creatures came out? Reptilians, right?
Yeah, and it's an amazing thing.
And by the end of it, you had an insectoid, little insectoid. I can't remember what his name is, but he's going to be, I guess, play a part in the next one. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because when people go on ayahuasca trips and DMT in a group setting, right, they're all seeing the same thing, and it's reptilian demons or fallen angel, whatever you want to call them, and insectoid. I'm not making this stuff up. This is what's getting popular today in private circles. All of this drug abuse, drug use, altered state of consciousness. You see it in a lot of movies nowadays. Not that it wasn't there before, but there's an uptick in it. Okay, volunteer.
Yeah, and the connection is with those portals. So you have those seraphim watchers in the abyss, and you have those scorpion beings, which are the Akraba Malu or the Gerda Balu, that are being led by Abaddon and Apollyon out of the abyss. Towards the midpoint of the last 7 years. And to have that as being an emphasis that is becoming linked together, coming through portals, understand that the abyss that we talked about in the underworld, known as Hades or Sheol also, is thought to be in the earth, but in a different dimension, and that they're trying to create portals to release those beings so that they can bring about this new age that they're trying to bring about, and this rebellion to lead the world as they did before the flood against the God of the universe.
Yeah, and you keep seeing these themes over and over and over again. Why? Conditioning is the way of the world. This is what the world does, and it's not like something that's going to go away. We're just pointing it out to you. There's another comic book writer that many people, I guess, are not aware of that much, but I think it's Alan Moore, right? And him, like Grant Morrison, has been given a run on graphic novels like Batman, The Dark Knight, and whatnot. But he is you can call him an alchemical dark magician, and I've watched a couple of videos where he's talking. He's not a dumb guy. He's just misled by. I think he's dead now, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And he puts it out there, man. Magic, writing a spell is to literally write.
Yeah,
it's not.
And what I found with that latest version of the Batman movies is you had this one character that shows up, Ra's al Ghul.
Yes.
Ra, as in the god
Mhm.
Ra. Al, as in that alliteration of Elalil, for angel or a god, and Ghoul, which is a demon spirit, a ghoul.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
was put together, and
Yeah.
he is this being that, as he morphs out, is not only leading the secret society that is, destroying parts of the world throughout history to control history, but this Ra's al Ghul lives for thousands and thousands of years, just as the immortal spirit went into the Nephilim in the beginning. I mean, you couldn't get more in your face in terms of how they base these names and things on. You just have to have enough knowledge to sort of say, what are they connecting here and what are they trying to tell us?
Yes, and as you pointed out earlier, they want to pretty much the story that's telling is the rise of the Antichrist. And if you go into the Kabbalah, you will see the same story. They want to make a chaotic world to where their version of the Messiah comes up out of that chaos. So,
Yep.
and also with the Ra's al Ghul thing and the Batman, it goes into Iron Fist. They go to Shangri-La, the place where they're in Tibet, where it's supposed to be some portal to what they call heaven.
Yep.
It's repeat through a lot of these series. It comes out of Buddhism, Hinduism, and whatnot. Go ahead.
Yeah, they have these portals, whether it's in Shangri-La or Argatha, as it's known. They have a different name for these different portals all around the earth that sort of goes to the same location. So, but understand portals is a significant part of their belief system, right? So you have that in the fairy mythos, where you have fairies coming through portals or fairy mounds, and also known as fairy dolmens, Dolmen, and there are many Stonehenge type of structures. You have portals at Gilgal Raphaim, which there's hundreds of them, and that's the Wheel of the Giants. You have portals that are in used in the alien mythos, that and I think that's probably where most of the aliens come from, is a different dimension. You have portals that were part of the Ugaritic, where you have Ugaritic texts, where you have the Rapiu, which is the root word for Raphaim, out of the sort of first Semitic languages after the flood, at Herman, which is HRM, Her Royal Majesty's Service, HRM. I don't think that's a coincidence for the royals out of England. But you have this technology that's trying to access portals and things now and into different dimensions. And just as we talked about the abysses into a different dimension. You have Tartarus, which is where the gods in Greek mythology and the heroes were imprisoned in. That's in another world. You have Anwin, which is in another place. It's also known as the other world. All of this is the same language talking about different dimensions that they're able to come through certain portals and or technology that it takes to access those portals. So that's why you see it laced in all of the various lanes, as I would say, of their literature, because it's all the same belief system.
Yeah. And Doctor Strange, even though portals have been in our movies and comic books, even Star Trek for a long time, Doctor Strange brought it home.
It didn't.
Yes. Straight Buddhism and whatnot, even though it's in all secular false religions, it brought it home. And then in Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Ghost Rider, who is the spirit of vengeance, he's a demon. The demon possesses more than one person. And anyway, in the Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., he came to, spirit of vengeance, to avenge something, but he had to take the AI that went rogue into hell. And the same portal you see here from Doctor Strange is the same way it was presented in the Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So again, portals, 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 and more portals. Right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you're not going to run out of portals, people.
No, it's one of those constitutive pillars of their belief system.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's why there's so much focus on quantum mechanics today and marrying that up with AI so that they can, work in different dimensions and do more than one task at the same time, which is sort of the limitation of quantum mechanics. And that's why they need to marry that up. And then that's why you see that showing up at places like CERN and things like that as to, what are they really trying to do there?
Yeah. And notice that in the end of the Avengers movies, it's called Endgame, with the reversal of the Rapture movie. That's what I call it. You have Doctor Strange and his other occultists open multiple portals across the universe to bring the so-called heroes to destroy the allegory of God. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and understand that they counterfeit everything. And so the end time, everything has to have a counterfeit. So one would expect they would have a counterfeit rapture. And then one would expect that they're all going to come back, just as you have all of those with Jesus coming in the sky at Armageddon, because they're going to have a counterfeit Armageddon as well. So that happens towards the midpoint of the last 7 years. And by Revelation 12, you have all out war in the skies and everywhere, and then all of them are cast down. So they have to have a way of saying, who are these people coming back?
Yeah.
Right? Through the alien mythos and through these things with portals and, as you say a reverse rapture. I think that's, and again, you kind of have to put the pieces together to understand it, because they only give you pieces. And so we don't quite know what they're fully intending to do, but for some reason it seems to be also part of their belief system that they have to put it out there and tell us what they're going to do.
Yes. And also there's some heroes that people have a misconception about, like this one here, Storm. It's not in your face what she really is if you don't think about it. Oops, Storm. Not that Storm, Sue. For hero. This one right here, she had a relationship with the Black Panther, not in every iteration of her, but she is a witch. That's why she's able to wield the elemental powers. And she's not.
And witches are the priestesses of the occult religion. And typically when they have relationships to storms, those are to the storm gods, like Baal or the storm gods in India, right? So they're of a particular variety and a particular god that imagery gets overlaid with. But yeah, understand that the witches are priestesses and the wizards are priests of the mystical religions.
Yes. And so you have Storm, as we say, I'm going to say it again, she's a witch. And I used to read the comic books heavy, the X-Men comic books. They were my favorite comic books out of everything, and Wolverine and whatnot, but he's X-Men, so there you go. But some stuff are literally in your face, like this one, Scarlet Witch, right? Now, Scarlet Witch, obviously, she's a witch. She's from the family of what's it called, Magneto. It's one of his daughters, whatever, and Quicksilver is her brother. But the point is that the elemental magic goes off into the realm of mingling human flesh and genes with an android AI. Later on, they get married and everything. Vision.
Yeah.
The name is the Vision, right? And that's what he really looks like in the comic books, but it looks too goofy on film, so they didn't use that costume. This is for the TV show that's coming out. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and again, I like that imagery of the word scarlet, because that's usually a red color, just as red's associated with the red dragon, which is Satan. And so there's obviously a meaning and a connection there that they're trying to convey as to who she is a priestess of, or a goddess of.
Yes, and people laugh at Christians when we point out stuff like Harry Potter has influenced the witchcraft revival in certain ways, both in males and females. This is also a part of it. Harry Potter is like so old now. It is popular still, but this is taking its place. Stuff like Scarlet Witch or whatnot. And she's been around for a long time as well, but she wasn't a popular character, like a household character. Now she is,
Right. Yep.
And so we also have Captain Marvel here, which there are two Captain Marvels. There's one in DC and one in Marvel, and in DC his name is Shazam. Okay, and he's more related to Zeus and some other stuff, right? And this one, this is Inanna or Isis, and got 1,000 other names, and you have the Star of Inanna there on our chest, and this is related to the Queen of Heaven, who the Catholic worship is Mary, and all that stuff. Sir.
Well, yeah, and understand that this mother goddess aspect of Ishtar, Inanna, Isis, Astarte, Gaia, is going to become more and more prominent, and that's why we're starting to see more of those references to it, because it's part of that ancient religion in terms of their duality of male and female as well, right? So you always have a god with a matching, particularly in the parent gods, a god with a female aspect, and also you seem to have that in the lower god aspect as in Osiris and Isis. And so this is going to have to be preparing people for how the religion is going to be changing and how it's going to be leading it. So that's why that's why you're going to see more of it. And you're absolutely right about that connection of the apparitions, and that's going to become more prominent as well.
Yeah, and here we have the Islamic version of Captain Marvel, because inclusion is a part of this as well. Okay, and it's not that inclusion is bad; it's just that the way they're using it is not what you think. Okay, so I think her name is Kamala Khan. I don't really like the character anyway. Big hands are goofy to me, but this is what they're bringing out to the youngsters now, and she's also in the new Marvel video game. Okay, so the big lightning on her chest, you can explain that, my friend.
That's part of the storm gods, and the bolts of lightning that the gods would send down. It can also represent knowledge and light. So it's got a lot of different meanings on a lot of different levels. So yeah, very, very interesting. And when you have Islamic sort of overtones and things starting to be used, that's again trying to bring them into this coming end time religion and to harness it. Understand that the Quran talks a lot about the jinn or the jinn, and there's two different kinds in there, and one is the let's say an angelic kind, because that's who Iblis or Satan would be called, and is called a jinn. And then you have another jinn, which is more of a spirit being and more of an evil spirit being and more of a demonic spirit being of the demigods, which genie is based on. And so they're going to be touching on more of that to bring that in to sort of into the family fold as they're trying to do that. But I think you wanted to touch on something more on the Thunderbolt, but I thought I'd leave that to that, because that crosses over into so many different other pantheons, whether or not it is, Zeus is a lightning bolt, or it's the lightning bolt that's coming from Odin, or what have you. But so I'm not quite sure what you wanted to emphasize on that. There's a lot of different layers, so I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I was going into the Baal worship, Thor
as the storm god. Yep.
Yeah, all that stuff. This movie named Bolt, this dog is super hybrid, I believe, and you'd have to really, this one you have to dig deep to find the connotation, because not in your face except for the lightning bolt. Okay, so but then it goes back to what you were just talking about, because I didn't really know much about the dog gods or whatnot. I just knew Anubis, and that was it. That's where my knowledge base stopped right there. So it's interesting that you brought this up, and now I bring up both. So very interesting stuff there. And we listen. We can go a long stretch with this whole superhero thing. So this will be a series with myself, and sometimes Gary will join me, and other people will join me. Maybe Danny Zimmerman or somebody that we love talking about this stuff because this was a part of our childhood, and we didn't notice, obviously, because we were kids, we were teenagers and whatnot, even young adults. We couldn't get all the connotations. Some things stood out, but it still wasn't that obvious. Let's go really quick biblically so we could start to wrap up a little bit here. Let's go to Romans 1 Bible. So the secular audience that are watching and our Christian fellows that might not know where to go with this can actually get some context here of why the animal spirits are so popular around the planet. There's no shortage of animal gods, okay? When you go into Hinduism, I think they have 350 million gods or something like that. And most of them are animals, or if not all, or mixed with animals, hybrids or something, right? And then off of that, you have the offshoot of Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism, all the isms and schisms over there in the East. But it just doesn't stop there. When you look at Kung Fu Panda, I watched the first one. I liked it, but again, I wasn't aware of too much. I knew that some of the martial arts stuff was weird, and that's a whole other story. But when you got to Kung Fu Panda 3, it got really mystical. I was in the theater. I'm like, what are we watching? So, but by that time, I was starting to get more alert to what all of this meant. So anyway, Romans 1, right? And it goes to why God's wrath is coming on the planet. I'm on the ESV right now, so King James only people, don't be offended, okay? Good. Okay, so it pretty much says the same thing here. Okay, so and I actually love the King James myself, so I'm not beating anybody up. So why is the wrath of God coming to this planet? It says, for the wrath of God, let me bring up the scripture here so you guys can see. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them, right? So they've been shown, okay? For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, has been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to dishonor of their bodies among themselves. And in some versions, they've been given over to a depraved mind, okay, or a reprobate mind, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing the shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty of their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They were full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless, though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, it's sort of sums up everything that we've been talking about today. So what a terrific passage, and even to the point where it's the knowledge that humans develop. It's those sciences that are all designed in the beginning to lead people away from God, not to give God credit for anything, to degrade God, and to do things to honor their pantheon of gods. And of course, those 7 liberal sciences are the same ones that we have today, and they're doing the same thing. And whether or not any manifestation or extension of out of that knowledge is honoring that pantheon of gods, and in this case, you know, when you have things like rhetoric and dialectics and you know, the first 3 sciences that and grammar that are, you know, where literature comes from. And then guided by the philosophy, which philosophy comes out of those first 3 sciences, is the theology of religion. It's all designed to lead people away from God. It always has been. It always will be. It's not that knowledge is bad. It's how it's used, whether or not it's good or evil. And they will use it to deceive humankind, all to justify the angelic rebellion and try and lead more people astray.
Absolutely. Guys, this has been fun. You know, one day in the future, we'll get Gary to come back on this segment of the program. We're going to have other segments with him coming shortly. And I hope that you guys took notes. If you're not saved and you're watching the program, you know, the word of God is offensive. So, I mean, I'm not trying to offend you. The word of God is offensive. That's just how it is. And I hope that you, as an unsaved person, would contemplate what we're saying here tonight, even if you don't believe all of it, and, you know, seek out God. You know, He came to die for all of our sins, and we're born in it. He had a system of basically a way to save us out of the consequences of sin, which is death and hell, and then the lake of fire. So the creator of the universe came down in human flesh for you and me and Gary and everybody on this planet. And even the person right now that's watching, and your heart is heart, he loves you. Even the person that might be in a serious sense of emotion right now because of what we're talking about, he loves you. And no matter what you've done, you can be saved, because there is something called redemption, and it came through the finished work on the cross. He resurrected on the 3rd day, and that's pretty much the gospel message. Seek God today. Everybody else, I hope you took notes. If you're a Christian, you can use this to start conversations and reach younger people, reach young adults, and everybody else. Don't let them burn. Thank you for joining us today on Twitch, Periscope, YouTube, and Facebook. This has been a great program. Thank you, Gary, for joining us. And tell people where to find yourself.
Yes, if you want to find me, the best way is through my website, which is the Genesis6conspiracy.com, with the number 6conspiracy.com. And on there, I have a contact icon for the author, which has my email, which is the Genesis6conspiracy@gmail.com. Very simple to remember if you know the name of the book. And you can ask me any questions that you want there. If you want some documents on what we talked about today, I have a 3-part series on the dogmen. I have a 2-part series on the serpent gods and Nephilim. I have one on the lion men. I have a couple on the Tengu and Kamazots and Zabelba, and also have one on the lion men, and also on the scorpion beings coming out of Revelation 9. And if you want to know about maybe some other topics, I've got a lot of documents. Just name the subject. If I've got it, I'll send it to you. No charge. And you can follow me on Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63, and Facebook under Gary Wayne. And you can message me there on Messenger or on my timeline.
All right. Thank you for your time, sir. And everybody else, thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, share, share, share. And that's the end of our program. Don't let them burn.